We are so thankful to gather and worship. That's one of the joys of coming together, the church family. Because something happens when we come together. God meets us here. And for some reason, the Spirit is so powerful that we can all live in different places, live in different homes. But when we show up here, it's as though the Spirit speaks to each of us right where we are and meets us in this moment. And we have so much to be thankful for today. We are so thankful for you today, friends. I want to invite your attention this morning to Ephesians Chapter 4, if you will. Ephesians Chapter 4. And I want to read just one verse out of that particular text today. And as you're turning there, help me to thank the Lord for this music ministry this morning, this praise team, and this choir. They have ushered us into God's presence, and we are forever thankful. Ephesians Chapter 4, and I want to read for us verse 29. Ephesians Chapter 4 and verse 29. And here's what it says. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. Let's read it one more time. This time, put your name in it. BRYAN, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of my mouth, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. You may be seated. Today we want to talk about communication. Communication. To kind of help us get started, let's watch this brief clip to help us get started with communication for today.
Me and Mommy talk for hours in the morning. There's something about that first thing in the morning that we literally can talk for 2.5, 3 hours.
But y'all can do that at any time in the day. Let me just tell you, because that was one of the things that I admired so much about your relationship, and I recognized that I didn't have it in mind. It's so important.
There was a moment that launched our communication. Before we got married, we were having the party at the house. Remember that? We were playing Pictionary, 20 people around the table.
Yes.
And Trey is sitting on my lap. He's like 1.5. He's like, T might be just about 2. In some order, she cursed at me in front of 20 people at this party.
Ooh.
With Trey sitting on my lap, right? And I grabbed a newspaper and I said, bah! Can I talk to you in the other room, please?
Oh my God.
And I was like,
Right.
did this joker just hit me on my head with a newspaper? Like I'm a dog?
We went in the other room and I said, Jada, this is the deal. I grew up in a household where I watched my father punch my mother in the face. I will not create a house, a space, an interaction with a person where there's profanity and violence. If you have to talk to me like that, we can't be together.
Wow.
Your words can make or break your relationship. Here in Ephesians chapter 4, verses 29, Paul is writing to this church at Ephesus. As he writes to this church at Ephesus, he's trying, in the first 3 chapters of the book, he begins to talk about our faith, what it means to be saved, what has God done for us, what it means to have a relationship with God. But then in chapter 4 through 5 and 6, he begins to make a transition and now begins to talk about how your faith now ought to show up in your lifestyle. And here in particular, around verse 29, he now specifically talks about how me being a follower of Christ ought to flow even in the very words that I use. Because your words either make or break your relationship. For the last several weeks, we've been talking about relationships and how to build healthy ones. But foundational to any healthy relationship is solid and good and true communication. This is what Paul is saying when he gets to Ephesians 4. Paul is trying to convey to us this whole idea that your communication is, your relationships will be founded on having good communication. What you love about Ephesians 4 is this, that Paul says, literally, he says, don't let anything unwholesome come out of your mouths. I mean, it's interesting because sometimes we feel like we can't control our words, or sometimes we don't, it's just how I am, and I just got to tell it like it is. I just always got to speak the truth. I want you to understand what Paul says. Paul says, don't let any unwholesome. In other words, Paul says, each and every one of us has the power to control our words. That our words are not some uncontrollable force that just gets the best of you. No, he says if God can help you control your life, he can help you control your lips. That's what he's saying. He's saying that you have the power. I've got it, you've got it. We all have the power and capacity to be able to control our words, because our words help shape our relationships. The latter part of that verse says this, so that it might benefit others. Do you know that the goal of your communication is for you to communicate and benefit other people? So when you and I talk, the goal is not for me just to read somebody for filth, not just to get it off my chest, not just to call somebody out, but it says this, the goal is for you to connect with somebody. And when you talk to someone, they ought to feel that you want to know more about them. They ought to feel that you love them, and that's why you're spending time talking and connecting with them. That because we love God, and because we love people, our words and our communication are the bridge to help us build healthy relationships. You want a healthy relationship with your friend? Y'all got to have a healthy talk. Y'all got to learn how to talk to each other. You want a healthy relationship as a couple or as a dating couple with your babe? You got to be able to talk to one another. You want a healthy relationship with your kids, whether they are 10 or 30, you got to figure out how to talk to each other. And this is what he's teaching us. He's saying he's giving us some foundational ideas, because the quality of your conversation dictates the quality of that relationship. If we never talk about anything of substance, we never have a relationship of substance. And there are all these different levels of communication, but ultimately you and I got to learn how to get to a place where we can be transparent with people and they can be transparent with us. Now I want to use the book of Proverbs today to hopefully lift up 4 principles that I hope can help you and me to learn how to use our words wisely. Now, there's probably nobody in the room that says, you know what, Pastor, I'm good with this sermon. I got this all under control. And that's the very person that needs this sermon the most. Because there's not a person in the room, myself included, that has not allowed our words to get the best of us. Didn't say what we probably should have said, or said too much when we should have said more or less. All of us have work to do. And my prayer and hope is that we'll got to use these principles out of the book of, so here's what I want to do. I want to use the book of Proverbs to kind of give us a framework for building. Matter of fact, let me start here. The Bible talks about our words all throughout Scripture. I mean, it's so important to your faith, because I don't care how mature in Christ you may think you are. Much is determined by the words that you use. I mean, if somebody really wants to know where your walk with the Lord is, let them follow you to the house. If anybody really want to know where your walk with the Lord is, let them follow you when somebody cuts you off on 35. Words are so important to us. Let them follow you when your team lost last week and you got cheated. Let them follow. Okay, let's go back. That was so wrong. I'm so sorry. That was shade in the middle of a sermon on communication. Forgive me. You know I love y'all. I really do. I feel bad for the Saints fans. I feel really bad. All right, so I want to lift up 4. All right, so the Bible talks about communication all over the Scriptures. All right, in Proverbs 18:21, it says, life and death is in the power of the tongue. I mean, that means, in James 3, he says that the tongue is like a restless evil, full of deadly poison. In Matthew 15:11, it says, all of your words flow from your heart. In Matthew 12:36, it says, we'll be judged by every word that we say. So the Bible talks about it all over, but I want to lift up just 4 ideas that I hope can help us as we continue to try to honor God with our words. Here's the first one. Choose the truth over lying. Choose the truth over lying. Proverbs chapter 12. I want to use Proverbs to help unpack Ephesians 4. Proverbs chapter 12. verse 19. Proverbs 12, verse 19. Proverbs 12, verse 19 reads this way. It says, truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue lasts only for a moment. If we're going to build healthy relationships, then our relationships must be built on the truth and not on lies. It's been said that an average conversation, a 10-minute conversation, that a person lies at least twice in that conversation. One study said that women lie 3 times a day and men lie 6 times a day. Lying sometimes you don't even mean it. Sometimes it just comes out. You know what I mean? You end up exaggerating. You end up stretching the truth. End up making yourself a little bit better than you should. There's this. All of us are tempted. There's nobody in the room who says, you know what? I'm perfect. I got this. It's this temptation sometimes to make yourself look good. Temptation to try, because sometimes we don't know if people will really love us for who we are or value us for who we are. So sometimes we put on an image that may not always be as truthful. It's this temptation. One Willard Harlot said there are born liars that lie all the time. There are protector liars that may lie to protect someone. Then there are avoid trouble liars that lie so they don't get in trouble. My wife once called me not long after we'd been married, and she said, the water's off at the house. I said, are you serious? I said, there must be an outage in the neighborhood. Let me call that water company. I can't believe they would turn our water off. I know I paid. Did you pay the bill? I paid. Yeah, I paid the bill. I paid the bill. Knowing good and well I had not paid the bill. I had not followed through. And I was trying to avoid getting in trouble. So I just. Hey. And so it happens to the best of us. Happens to the best of us. But lies deteriorate relationships. Yeah, she lost a little trust in me because of I lied about that. And that's why we got to be careful about building relationships on lies. And for those that are in the dating scene, sometimes you go on Plenty of Fish, you go on your dating site, and you start answering all the questions. And you got to be careful because you'll put in a profile that your own friends wouldn't recognize you by the time you get done with that profile. And that doesn't help. You can't build relationships like that because you built it on what schools you went to and accomplishment. You built this whole profile of somebody else. And so we got to be careful because then when we connect and get in a relationship, we have a hard time trusting and getting to know each other because we're building a relationship on lies. Instead, you and I must build relationships on truth. Speak the truth. Ephesians 4:13 says this way, speaking the truth in love. It couples truth and love together in that passage because it's not enough just to tell the truth. Your truth must be packaged in your love for the person you're talking to. Some people say, well, I just got to tell them the truth. They need to hear it like it is. That's all good, but is your method and approach right? Because if your method and your approach is wrong, they won't hear anything you have to say. He said, you and I got to build relationships built on truth. Truth about how we feel, truth about how we may have, what we may have experienced. Every relationship needs transparency and openness. At some point in your journey in that relationship, you want that relationship to matter, you and I got to be willing to be honest about who we are and what we're feeling and be honest about, here it is, I feel slighted when you didn't call me back. Why do I have to always call you? Being honest, truth, and love. I feel disrespected when you don't take the time to talk to me first before you made that decision. I feel some kind of way or overlooked when I'm there for you, but when I need you, you don't seem always to be there. Or I feel appreciated every time you make time for me. It really makes me to feel valuable and wanted. Or you have a bad habit of raising your voice and pointing your finger to me like a little kid. And that really, I really feel disrespected by that. All of us must learn how to speak the truth and not just speak lies. Here's the next one. You got to choose listening over assumptions. You got to choose listening. You want to build our relationships. You got to choose listening over assumptions. Proverbs chapter 18, verse 13. Proverbs 18, verse 13 reads this way: to answer before listening, that is folly and shame. Here he writes and says, anytime that we give an answer and we haven't listened, anytime we try to make these assumptions, he says it ends up to foolishness. It ends up to causing shame on us because we didn't get the full story. You ever made assumptions about somebody? Assumptions can cause damages in a relationship. They happen all the time when we begin to assume that we know what someone is feeling, thinking, or how they go respond. And so then we decide that we can dictate everything. And we use our tongues to make these assumptions about people. If you would have done this, everything would be better in our relationship. You should already know what I want and know what I like. He didn't call me because he's not interested in me. It could have been that he just was an oversight. They didn't invite me because they don't like me. No, it could have been they just left your name off the list. Actually, it wasn't intentional. He's late because he must be with that chick. It could have been that he had to work longer on that particular day. He's so quiet, there must be something wrong. Maybe he's just quiet. You see how they didn't like my picture? They didn't make no comment. Maybe they didn't see your picture. I'm always commenting on their stuff. I know why you didn't answer my call. You want to talk to me. No, I have to work. She don't like me. Did you see how she looked at me? She was looking at the person behind you. She wasn't looking at you. There are these assumptions that undercut our relationships. And let's not even talk about the person that knows everything. It's that one person, they got everything under control. They've assumed and they know everything about everything. It's hard to be in a relationship like that. It's really hard. Instead, we got to choose how to listen. We got to listen. That means you got to turn the phone off and listen. That means you got to turn the TV off and listen. That means you've got to change your plans and make time for lunch or dinner or time, a cup of coffee, and just say, hey, let's just talk. And then when we talk, we have to learn how to listen. Is one of those things that we really take for granted. But it's an incredible skill that all of us need to have. Now, hearing and listening aren't the same thing. Hearing it means you just may have heard it, but listening means that you were in tune with the person you were talking to. Someone has said that listening is one of the greatest things to show you love somebody. To sit down and talk to them. It can be your son or daughter that's 8, 9, 10 years old. Sometimes they love having time alone with a parent, talking. And one of the greatest things we can do when we're trying to learn how to listen to somebody is to really lean in. Somebody said 2 words, uninterrupted and unhurried. Listening to somebody. I'm a quiet guy, so sometimes it's hard for me to keep conversations going as better as some others are. So I've had to learn that one of the best things you can do is to learn how to ask a whole lot of questions. The more questions you ask, the more people get to share about themselves, the more loving they feel and the more they feel heard. Our relationships need each other to just say, hey, I'm hearing you. And then you got to ask those questions like, now what I hear you saying is this. Okay, so what I hear you saying is, you wish I would have been there. What I hear you saying is, when I don't talk to you about this, you feel like I'm not inviting you in, or you feel like I'm trying to cover something up, or you feel like I'm hiding something. It's these when you listen to someone, and here's the challenge though, men and women are incredibly different. Women, they're born with like 3 times more words than men are. I mean, the kids, boys over there playing, talking about vroom, 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 and girls, they got complete sentences, and they play in school. I mean, they got a whole different repertoire. Their brains are wired for communication even more effectively. And so it takes some time for guys. Our task is sometimes what we end up doing is we make the mistake of trying to fix what she's talking about. And sometimes all she wants for you to do is just to hear her out. She don't need you to say, you know what you should have told her. And here's what she wants. And then what happened? She said what? And what did you do? I'm so proud of you because 10 years ago, you would have went a whole nother way. And then, man, listen, okay, all right. Now, what time did the game? No, I mean, and so listen, she wants you to listen. She wants you to listen. I'm trying to tell you, man, if you listen to her, it makes, and here's the thing, it's not just with men and women, it's with our kids. You know, I've got boys and girls, and watching them talk, and it's amazing. Just asking them questions, trying to get into their world, helps them to know that you value them and that you love them. Here's the next one. Here's number 4, friends. You got to choose to be slow to speak over attacking. Slow to speak, slow to speak, slow to speak. And let's look at 2 Proverbs. Proverbs 13:3. Proverbs 13:3. Here it is. Proverbs 13:3. Those who guard their lips preserve their lives. But those who speak rashly, speak quickly, speak without thinking, will come to ruin. Proverbs 15:1 says this: a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Do you see this? He's saying if you attack somebody, if you're quick with it, if you let the tongue get the best of you, that thing ends up causing greater damage. James 3 says your tongue is almost like a fire. And it says that literally forest fires can be started from one match. And the same thing can happen with our tongues. If we're not careful, we can light a match in a relationship that can set the relationship on fire. And we say something, and then they say something, and that thing goes back and forth. And before long, we both have said words that we wish we hadn't have said. We've called them names. We've cussed them out. We've demeaned the character of God that's on that person. Some of you have grown up in homes where you experienced this, where you had to go through the difficulty of being called out your name, of being so demeaned and degraded that you've had to rebuild your own self-esteem. As you tried to put the pieces together because you understand that what they said when we were kids was totally not true. The sticks and stones may break my bones, but words hurt. Have you noticed that the suicide rate among teenagers and students is rising? Depression is rising. Anxiety is rising. And part of it is because of what they see on social media. Part of it because of cyberbullying. Part of it is because people are now using social media to hide behind and cast stones that cause great damage on our lives. Because our words matter. And so you and I got to say, God, help me, help me. I mean, I almost see God saying, put a gate up. He's almost like saying, God, help me put a gate up so that my words are not words that are constantly attacking and beating people up and demeaning people. But he says, instead, I got to be slow to speak. Lord, help me to know when, help me to know what, help me to know how. Give me the right timing, because timing can be everything. Lord, give me the right approach, give me the right tongue. Lord, help me not to be the person that comes in office and we see that person like, oh man, I'm going the other way. Help me to be the person that when I come in the room, people know that you've given me a grace to be able to use my words wisely. Slow to speak. For some, that means you got to count to 10, whatever you got to do, leave the room, take a break, call time out. But you got to say, Lord, help me to be slow to speak. James puts it this way when he gets around to verse 1 and verse 9. He puts it this way. He says, everyone ought to be quick to listen, and slow to speak. It's important. Slow to speak, slow to speak, slow to speak. God, help me to slow down. Help me to use my words and not be destructive, but help me to be constructive in what you want me to do. Here's the last one, friends. The last one's here. Choose positive over negative. Two verses here. Proverbs 12:25. Proverbs 12:25. Here it is. Anxiety weighs down the heart, but a kind word cheers it up. Then turn over to Proverbs 21, verse 9. Proverbs 21, verse 9. Reads this way. Better to live on the corner of the roof than to share a house with a quarrelsome wife. Oh, God. Oh, God. Oh, God. My brother just woke up. He just woke up. I don't know. He was sleeping. The joker said, that's my life verse. He said, that's my life verse. What he's trying to convey to us is the impact of negativity on a relationship. Truth of the matter, many of you could have wrote this verse yourself. You already knew this to be true because you've seen it. He's saying it's dangerous, it's hard to have a sustained, healthy relationship. Whether it's a friendship, whether it's a parent-child, whether it's a marriage, a family member, it's hard to have one when they are incredibly negative. When they're always nitpicking. When the first thing they see is, what did you do with your hair? When the first thing they do is to see all the bad. When the first thing they do is to criticize. When the first thing they do is to demean or use sarcasm or throw shade or just have a critical attitude or have a complaining attitude. I mean, you talk to them and by the time they get done talking, you're depressed. I mean, by the time they get done, I mean, they have taken all your energy. He says if you want to have healthy relationships, you gotta choose to be positive. He gives this example of the married woman and the wife, where the wife is nagging, and then he gives a relationship of how a kind word uplifts. So he's saying you and I gotta avoid, because this negativity it brings down the entire room. It sucks the energy out of us. And I'm not saying that bad things don't happen to us. I'm not saying that life can't be hard. I'm not saying that life isn't difficult. But here's what I am saying. What he is saying is this. Even when you read the psalmist, there are times in the psalmist where he has a complaint toward God. There are times in the Psalms where he's struggling with lament. But all he's saying, but if you notice the path of those Psalms, he always ends with some hope. And because as people of God and people of faith, despite the difficulties that we face, we still find hope in God despite whatever comes our way. It doesn't mean that we have a false joy. No, it's that we have a deep-seated joy because we believe God is working through even the most difficult circumstances in my life. And we believe this world will never give me the best that I'm looking for. I will only have it when he comes back again. And so, yes, there are times when we have difficulty, but our speech and our words cannot be totally characterized by negativity. But instead, we've got to learn to speak life, speak words of positive and words of upliftment and words of encouragement. If the people of God can't be positive, we're in a whole lot of trouble. Here's Daniel Gottman, I believe his name is. He did an experiment with couples. He observed couples as they lived together for a period of time. As he watched them live together over a period of time, he was then able to track the healthiness and the length of their marriage, or happiness of their marriage. Here's what he discovered. He discovered that healthy marriages had a 5-to-1 magic rule. And he said they didn't even know it was happening, but they would always say 5 positive things before they ever said 1 negative thing. He said he discovered that these healthy, vibrant, satisfying relationships, they had this 5-to-1 rule, that they had a greater habit of celebrating the positive characteristics and aspects and realities of life than they did focusing on the negative and critical aspects of life. And I believe that applies not just to marriage, I believe that applies to all of our relationships. That the more my emphasis is on the positive attributes than rather just all the negative, the healthier that relationship can be and become. So it's not about me just talking about what you may have missed or the flaws you have, but it's me saying, hey, you know what, I really appreciate you being there for me. I really appreciate what you do for the kids. I really appreciate the friend that you are to me. I really appreciate just the character and how I can always count on you and depend on you. I really admire the way you've grown your business and expanded your business. I really admire your faith. I've watched your prayer life as you've grown, gotten closer to God, and I have so much. It's us finding the positive. I'm not asking you but the goal is this. You got to learn how to look for it and spot it. If you look for the negative and you look for the failures and you look for the mistakes, you'll always find those. But if you say, I want to look for what I value in this person and what God is doing in their lives, and how God has worked in your lives, you will also find that. A couple of things. You got to look for the positive, and here's the other thing. You got to stop complaining so much. You know what I mean? I'm not saying we don't have difficulties, but at some point we got to be like Paul, who said, I've been rich and I've been poor, and I've learned how to be content whatever my situation is. So I got to stop complaining. I got to find contentment. I got to find how to have contentment in whatever the season I may be in. And here's the next one. I got to stop comparing my relationships to everybody else. Stop looking on social media at somebody else. So, ooh, why don't we do more of that? How come I don't? Listen, man, those pictures, there's a whole story behind the pictures. And so make sure that you learn to value the unique work that God is doing in your relationship and in your family and in your season and in your situation, rather than always comparing it to somebody else's. These 4 principles that I pray will help each of us as we continue to build and honor God, to use our words wisely, and help strengthen our relationships. Here's the challenge for you this week. I want you to pick one person a day this week and find a way of how to affirm one person for each day. That's 7 people, one person each day. And find a way to use your words to help build and encourage that person. I mean, find a way to use one of these 4 principles and just say, hey, this is my person for the day. The goal is that it becomes a habit. But until then, all of us have to start somewhere. My children go to this camp the last few years every summer. And when they go to this camp in summertime, one of the things they do at the end of the camp, they have this thing called character traits. Character traits, where at the end of the camp, the counselor that spent a week with them will call out 3 characteristics they see in them. And they call the kid up, and they put the arm around the kid, and then they begin to call these out. This summer, when my daughters went, and they said this about her. They said, she is uplifting, authentic, and bold. And it's amazing because they put her on a little card, and my daughter's gone the last couple of years. In her room, she has all of them pinned up. Because it's as though she wants to remind herself of who she is and how God is uniquely working in her life. And I wonder sometimes, I imagine what would happen if each of us had our own little card, where people around us had called out and said, you are authentic, you are bold, you are fearless, you are a restorer of people. And then we had that to look at every single day. I imagine that it would help encourage us. I imagine that it would strengthen us. I imagine it would keep us focused on the work he's doing in each of our lives. Why do I say that? Because here's the truth, friend. Your words matter. And God uses our words to either build or break our relationships. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your care. Thank you for challenging us here today.